Well, I feel like summer camp has a lot to teach the rest of the world because at camp, we're focused 100% on the relationship and connection and fun. And we're not concerned with grades or scores. And that helps kids a lot because to be in a setting where it's just about them being able to think and be themselves is quite powerful. Hello and welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast, where each week we talk about ideas for raising kids who become thriving adults. I'm your host, Audrey Monkey. I'm a summer camp director, writer, and speaker, and I've had the privilege of working with thousands of children, teenagers, young adult counselors, and parents over the past 3 decades. My husband, Steve, and I are raising 5 kids who currently range in age from 15 to 25. So my interest in raising kind, optimistic, self-reliant kids who become thriving adults is personal as well as professional. For this episode of the podcast, I'm thrilled to bring you my conversation with Michael Reichert, author of How to Raise a Boy, The Power of Connection to Build Good Men. Reichert is the founding director of the Center for the Study of Boys and Girls' Lives at the University of Pennsylvania. He is also a clinical practitioner specializing in men and boys who has conducted research globally. After reading his book and having this conversation with him, I really want to get a copy of How to Raise a Boy into the hands of every parent who is raising a son and every teacher, camp counselor, or other youth professional who works with boys. I hope you enjoy episode 89, How to Raise a Boy with Michael Reichert. Today on the podcast, I have Michael Reichert. He is the author of the brand new book, How to Raise a Boy, The Power of Connection to Build Good Men. Welcome, Michael.
Nice to be with you, Audrey. Thanks for inviting me and glad to be with you and your listeners.
As I said before we started recording, I have been reading your book and it's really good timing for me because I am moving into camp counselor training in a couple weeks. And we have really been focused the last few years on making sure we prepare our male counselors for the important role they play with boys. So your book is about how to build and maintain strong connections with boys. Why don't we start with you just telling a little bit about why that has become more challenging because of the whole boy code or what you call the act like a man box?
First, let me say, Audrey, that I'm really glad to hear that over the last couple of years, you've been focusing on the important role that your male counselors play in relation to male campers. I don't think it's an isolated phenomenon. I think schools everywhere I go to are talking about boys, wondering about boys. And I think that we're realizing that our theories, the guiding theories that we relied upon, that they really don't work very well, and that we need something that's more rigorous, more developmentally grounded, and, consequently, I think a very different approach to boys. And that's really what I tried to outline in the book. I tried to talk about the new science that's emerging from the field of boyhood studies, which is, not longer than 20 or so years old. So, I think that kudos to you for recognizing or observing, that your boys, your male counselors, your camp experience has the opportunity to offer something transformative to the boys who come. I do think that, in outdoor experiences, experiential education opportunities, there's an opportunity to get to know boys outside of the conventional ways that we measure and evaluate them. We tend to know them as performances rather than people. And to train your counselors to understand the power that they have to build those kinds of relationships that can alter a boy's trajectory, that's really important work.
Yeah, thank you. I do think there's a lot of research right now in the camp world that the American Camp Association is doing, actually through the University of Utah. And they're about halfway through a 5-year study, and they're finding that the biggest, most positive outcome people are reporting, former campers, is the relational skills that they learned at camp. And they're saying that it was unique to that experience. It was a place that far more than any other setting helped them with their relationships, which is amazing to think about. That is why we really need to get more kids to camp, actually.
I think we're in real synchrony here in terms of what I'm recommending in my book and what your 30 years or more experience has taught you about children and child development. What's so interesting is we didn't know that, or we didn't acknowledge that about boys until just recently. I did that global study of teachers and adolescent male students. And the boys in the study, and ultimately we included about 2,500 boys from about 50 different schools in 6 different countries. The boys were very clear that the relationship was make or break. That to ask a boy to do something that he doesn't know how to do, that he doesn't do well, to go to that vulnerable edge and ask him to depend upon the guidance, the instruction, the support of an adult, that the only way a boy will risk that kind of uncertainty is if there's an existing relationship, some degree to which he feels like he trusts that adult, both to be a guide and to know him as a person. So I'm sure at camp you find all the time that boys that are misbehaving in one way or another, boys who are struggling in one way or another, the magic that enables them to overcome those struggles is somebody knowing and caring about them. That's certainly what we found.
Absolutely. And also seeing the good in them, like pointing out their strengths. As I think, you talk about this a lot. We all just have this desire to be seen and known for who we are. And when we don't look deep enough into our boys, they're going to be known for something. And sometimes it becomes bad things if they're not getting the attention they need from a caring adult, like you mentioned. So, well, I have to say too, just selfishly, I have 2 boys. I have 3 daughters who are 20, 23, and 25 now. And I have boys who are 18 and 15. And so it's been a personal thing for me in the last about 5 years, reading Michael Thompson, Gurian, I think it's Michael Gurian's book, and now yours. There's just a lot more to boys. I think people often think that because maybe they get quieter in adolescence, that means they don't have as much going on, when we know that that's not the case. There's a lot going on. They just don't have the emotional capacity to talk to us about it until we really help bring that out in them. So it's not that there's not a lot going on with them. It's that we haven't figured out how to relate to them in a way that's going to help them feel those feelings and talk about them.
I say that a slightly different way. I say first off that at birth, boys are just as emotionally capable as girls. It's not the experience of emotions that differs by gender. It's the expression of emotions and the opportunities that we provide children to practice coding feelings with language and communicating it. And we shut those opportunities down for boys early. I watch my 2.5-year-old grandson already beginning to censor what he shows of being scared or being disappointed or being sad, because he's reading the cultural cues that we're sending him about what we're comfortable with from a boy, what we expect of a boy, what we're actually going to ask boys not to show. So if we do that routinely from beginning age 2 years old, by the time a boy becomes 12 or 14 or 16, he's had hours and hours less opportunity to practice those communication skills. On top of that, we have asked boys to put on a mask, to adopt the persona, the masculine persona that enables them to avoid being bullied or mistreated, somehow policed by their peer group. And behind that mask, boys are often misperceived. I found in trainings I've done, for example, with therapists who are trying to work with boys, often what the therapists, and these are folks that are trained to understand what we call countertransference, the therapist's reactions and feelings to the client. Even despite that training, those therapists find that they react to the anger or the blank face or the stone face of the client, and they infer things from that mask that are not at all true about the boy behind the mask. In classroom settings, in educational settings, what we find is that teachers react often to the behavior and get thrown by it. They get irritated, they get angry, they feel defensive, they feel scared, and they try to dominate the boy rather than connect with him. And those strategies of control and domination, up to and including medication, those strategies actually don't enable us to bring out the best in the boy. We might be able to secure his conformity, often not, but sometimes that's what we're going for. But, it doesn't at all, win the long game of cultivating that boy's virtue and his skills. And I do think that that's what education, that's what families, and that's certainly what summer camp needs to be about, right?
Okay, so let's switch gears because it does sound kind of dire, the news that, like what we're doing to these boys, that it's like, oh my gosh, even at 2.5. And then in the book, you talk about going at age 4 or 5, going from being open and authentic to being more guarded and less spontaneous. So what are specific things that we can do, whether we're parenting a boy or teaching a boy or being a camp counselor for a boy? What are a couple of the main strategies that you recommend for us?
Well, let me just say that in talks that I'm giving to parents, I say that I have really good news and I have sobering news. I just gave you the sobering news. Let me give you the good news.
Okay, great. I love good news.
Yeah, which is, but I don't think there's ever been a better time in human history to be caring for a boy. We are actually in a position to examine the nature of the boyhood that we construct and manage for boys, look at what outcomes it's producing, and ask ourselves, well, what theory is this based upon? Or is this mere prejudice and stereotype? And we have to dig deeper to look at the science of human development behind what we know about boys. And that science of human development is very clear, that we are wired to connect, that our human brains, our human hearts develop in relationship. And we have to offer boys and girls, all children, the kinds of opportunities, the kinds of relational opportunities that let themselves feel known and cared about. That's square one. It's revolutionary when we apply it to boys because there's still these overarching stereotypes and confusions that come into play for all of us, me with my grandson, me with my sons, teachers with their students, camp counselors with their male campers. And we're going to find ourselves, leaking these stereotypes out in all kinds of conscious and unconscious ways. And we just have to catch ourselves and in some ways go back to square one. And that's really where my book comes in. I recommend 3 strategies in particular. And the strategies are all aimed at communicating to the boy in a very real and palpable way that he is known and cared for. So the very first strategy sounds very simple and is actually the most difficult. And it is what I call deep listening. The gift of paying attention to someone, directing our mind and our heart to that person, settling our own thoughts, our own reactions, our own associations with what they're saying, settling all of that and giving them the space where they can tell us what they're thinking, what's going on with them, without interruption, without having to worry about being judged, without having to be given advice or directed in some way. I don't know that parents, for example, realize how seldomly they actually offer that kind of space to their sons. And, parents are often put off, parents or teachers, educators, are often put off by what seems like the boy's disinterest in sharing anything. How I understand that is he has come to not expect it, and he has adapted accordingly. So if he's rejecting or shy or withdrawn or uncommunicative, what I tell the adult is hang in, continue to pay attention. You've got developmental power on your side. He needs what you're offering. Stay with him. And don't be thrown off if he seems to not be noticing that you're paying attention to him. Continue doing it. And trust me, in time, he will turn towards you like a plant to the light. So that's number one strategy. And it's a muscle that we don't develop or practice very much, but simply paying attention and listening. again, without intervening. Sometimes parents feel like they have to give guidance, or counselors feel like they have to set parameters. But I think, what we expect of deep listening is it helps the boy become more consciously aware of his behavior and where it might be going off course and self-correct. And that's the long game I'm talking about. We want boys to self-correct. We want boys to be self-monitoring and self-regulating. So listening is the most basic skill for supporting that.
Hey, Sunshine Parenting listeners. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I want to take a quick moment to just thank you for making the debut of my new book, Happy Campers, 9 Summer Camp Secrets for Raising Kids Who Become Thriving Adults, such a success. I really appreciate your ratings and reviews on Amazon. Here's one that came from Bonnie Reed Fry. Her positive attitude and willingness to accept youngsters at their own self-recognized level are telling. It is so easy to lose the connections we share with our kids in the day-to-day hassles of life by forgetting that they also have opinions and thoughts and dreams that we might overlook when the trash doesn't get taken out and no one can even see the floor of their rooms and bills need to be paid and the laundry is piled neck high. Ms. Monkey's suggestions are spot on and ones we all need to reinforce in our everyday lives. Even her chapter titles will spur you on to looking at life a little differently, and her words will inspire you as they have me. This is a book I will gift to my great nieces, the new mothers of the world of tomorrow. I wish it had been written many years ago. Thank you so much, Bonnie, and everyone else who's taken the time to give Happy Campers a review on Amazon. I appreciate each and every word. If you'd like to learn more about Happy Campers, visit happycampersbook.com. Okay, and isn't this a skill that is not being developed as much anymore in all of us because of our distraction?
I think the level of our distraction, our distractibility is huge. And I can tell you, as someone that spends a lot of time listening, it is so uplifting to connect with somebody in that deep way. You come away feeling as though you really know somebody, you've connected with them, they've used what you're offering to improve their life. It's a great gift. And to have your gift accepted like that, I think is really validating. So, to your counselors or, other folks that listen to your podcast, I would just say that, give yourself the gift of listening to a boy. And don't be put off by boys that seem like they don't want your gift. They can't help themselves. They will want it sooner or later.
I do think that is so true with boys. You just have to be very patient.
Yeah.
If you're just still there, oftentimes I remember so many times picking my boys up from school and they kind of need a snack and they don't really want to talk. And then occasionally, one or the other, when we're alone sometime, would just spill out some story or want to talk or share an idea. But it wasn't like with my girls where it was every day. It was just sort of it occasionally pops up that we end up having these really good kind of deeper conversations, but you just have to kind of be there and be ready for it. I think it's just waiting. Well, go on with your other strategies, and then I'll see if we have time. I'll ask you a few more questions.
Okay, let me just say about that. So what we often don't perceive is the world that your son inhabits and how vigorously it prevents him from opening up and being vulnerable. So that he struggles or that it happens less frequently is not because he's less interested in doing it. He's been conditioned not to. And that he can overcome that conditioning and all the active ways in which he's being policed and actually spill to you should be evidence to you that that's his real nature. So that's number one strategy. Number two is the strategy of what I call special time. And really what we're trying to do there, the goal we're trying to get to, is to create a space that a boy can depend upon where he knows he will find you hanging in with him no matter where he goes or what interests he has. And the way we do that is we just simply assign a set time, 15 minutes, a half an hour, and we say to ourselves, I'm going to go be with my son or this camper, and I'm simply going to accompany him. I'm not going to direct that time. I'm not going to structure it. I'm not even going to make suggestions for what he should do. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do what he's doing. And I'm going to be interested in what he wants to do with our time together. At first, it might be playing video games or throwing pebbles in a stream or, shutting down and doing nothing. I mean, I've had all of that. But if you indicate to the boy that you're going to stay and that you're going to stay with him and that what interests you is whatever interests him, even if it's uncomfortable. A lot of parents don't like video games or don't want to throw a lacrosse ball around or, don't want to go wading through a stream or building a fort. It's out of their comfort zones, and they're going to find themselves actually trying to modify the time to fit their own particular comfort. But if we can stretch ourselves and go where our sons actually are, what we're communicating to our sons is they're so important to us that we want to know them as they are. And we want to accompany them where they live. And if we can do that, once a week at a set time that our son or our boy can count on, what that boy will do with that time, it will swing more and more towards him revealing himself more deeply, even to the point of opening up about emotional struggles he's having. That what you're building with him is the capital, the relational capital, that he can count on you not to go away or be put off by him. And that's the kind of safe space that lets boys go to the darkest depths.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you mentioned the 15 minutes, maybe once a week, because I think for many parents, they'd be like, oh my gosh, like right now we don't do any of that. So I like how you could start very small and just kind of present to your son, hey, you know what? This 15 minutes, I just want to hang out with you. What do you want to do? I'll just do whatever you feel like doing. I love that. It's funny. I know you mentioned Tasha Shore and Patty Whippler and the book Listen. And I had Tasha on this podcast earlier or last year. And so I had learned this whole concept of the different kinds of listening and the special time. And it's funny, we all have different words for how we do that. I call them one-on-ones when I'm talking to parents about something that camp counselors do. And it's a much shorter, it's not really the same. It's not the same in that it's not doing an activity with them, but it's a one-on-one full attention check-in with each camper. Just to say, what's going on? How's your day going so far? What can I help you with? How are your friendships? Just different little questions that the counselors ask. And what I explain to parents is it's part of the counselor's job description to just have that eyeball to eyeball, fully attentive on each kid at some point during the day, very casually. And sometimes as parents, we're so caught up in just the day and we got to get to soccer and what's for lunch and what's your homework. We forget to just say, hey, how's your day going?
Yeah. And what I'm trying to emphasize when it comes to boys' development is there is no greater gift that a caregiver can give to a boy than that one. I have high school age boys in a peer counseling group that I lead at a high school outside of Philadelphia telling me that by the time they're 15, 16 years old, no one's paying attention to them anymore, except in terms of what they do. And they're being heavily paid attention to in terms of their marks on tests or their athletic prowess or how cool they are. But to actually have somebody tuning in and being with them, paying attention to them, that is a rare and incredibly powerful gift. And Patty and Tosha certainly understand that. And the third strategy, because Patty and Tosha will be familiar to as well, but it's really a strategy for intervening when we notice that a boy is misbehaving or off course somehow. And the ambition there isn't to correct the behavior in some urgent, immediate way. Now, if that's needed, we should do that. But I really think that in every time we're correcting a boy or providing discipline to him, what we're really trying to do is build his capacity for self-regulation. We're playing a long game. And we're trying to cultivate his own steering mechanism. So the way to do that is first to notice, are we accurately perceiving this? Or are we reacting out of our own sense of upset or anger or irritation? Because if we are coming at a boy that way, he's going to feel that. And it's going to communicate to him that he's bad and we're requiring him to submit to our dominance. So much of boyhood is about submitting to dominance, whether it's peer group pecking order or, all the different activities that boys get involved in. I think in camp or other contexts, we actually have the opportunity to take a longer read of the situation. So I think if our goal is to build capacity, the boy's own capacity to self-correct or self-regulate, the going into the situation at a time when we've actually got slack, free attention, we've got an ease and a calm, it allows us then to set a limit with the boy that the boy can perceive as being for him rather than for our own sakes. It's not coming from our upset. It's coming because we perceive him to be behaving not as himself. And we can say, I'm not going to let you bully that guy in our cabin anymore because that's not who you are. What's going on? And then the final step, the real payoff, is the third step. So it's listen, limit, listen. And the real payoff is that third step where the boy then, because you've checked him, and probably what's driving him off course is emotional energy of one kind or another that he's not aware of, out will come that emotional energy, whether it's resentment or disappointment or rivalry or fear or sadness about something else. That should then come out. And your job is simply to be what we call a holding environment, a container for that, not to tell him what to think or to correct him, but simply to let him get it off his chest and get it out in the open, the light of day, where he can see that, yeah, maybe I'm jealous about Sam and, the fact that he beat me in that running race today or didn't include me, in his activity. But it doesn't improve the situation or make him more likely to be my friend if I mistreat him. So that's the kind of moral lesson that I think we're trying to enable.
Sure. I think for parents, a lot of it comes from, I think you mentioned this too, is just that the dreams you have for your son or your expectations. And so there's also the embarrassment aspect of it. So I think it's so difficult to separate kind of your own emotions from kind of seeing what the boys are doing or what your boy is doing. So I really like when you talk in the book about this whole thing about with our relationship with boys, that we, the adults, need to be the repairer of ruptures in the relationship. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Audrey, it's key. Yeah, I use a different term. I use the term relationship manager.
Yes, that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason I say that is because when we think about a child, whether it's in education or in games at camp or skill practices in camp, whether it's art or canoeing or sailing or whatever it might be, what we're basically thinking about is a child who is at the edge of their ability trying to acquire something new that they don't know how to do. So they are theoretically totally absorbed at that cutting edge and not in any position at all to really be monitoring the relationship at the same time. They are already vulnerable and dependent. And so if they act in such a way that the relationship breaks down, if the boy pulls away or becomes disappointed and rejects the caregiver, if the boy seems shut down or uninviting to the teacher or the caregiver, that should be a message to the caregiver that, as the relationship manager, that it's their responsibility, their singular responsibility, try a different strategy to reach that boy. Often what we find is that lots of boys come to relationship with adults already disappointed and perhaps even broken because of the boyhood that they've experienced. And they're not so easy to connect with. They might be really, really stone-faced or uninviting altogether, or outright oppositional, even disruptive, disrespectful, in ways that engender in adults kind of a reaction of, well, I'm going to pay attention to the kids that want me. And I'm going to try to just put that boy over there, you know. I had lots of teachers in the study we did talk about putting boys in the back row and ignoring them because, you know, there were so many students eager to learn from them, and these boys didn't seem to be. So, you know, the relationship manager responsibility is to not take those things personally, to recognize that they have this transformative power, and to continue to try different strategies. And if you reach the end of your rope and you have nothing more in your bag of tricks, that doesn't mean that that boy is unreachable. This was the key insight from our study, because what we saw was every type of boy with every type of problem was in fact being reached by someone with some particular approach. What it means is if you've exhausted your relational repertoire, you need to actually go back to square one and reimagine how to try a different approach to that boy and expand your repertoire, not give up on the boy or conclude that somehow he's unreachable.
That's so encouraging and very beautiful, because I feel like that is how a lot of people talk about boys or certain boys. And, you know, when you label a kid like that and they just need one person, and you say that in the book, one person, whether it's a parent or some mentor or adult, one caring adult, it can make the difference of the whole trajectory of their life.
Yeah, no, it's transformative. And that was really the news in these studies that we did, was the transformative power of connections with, you know, camp leaders or educators or coaches. And every boy can tell a story, you know, just a story of being uplifted by some adult that actually patiently reached him and helped him see himself in that more positive way.
Oh, absolutely. Well, our time is up, although I could spend the whole day talking with you. I am certain that people who are listening will want to pick up a copy of your book and also find out more about where they can find out more from you and your speaking. It sounds like you go speak at schools and that kind of thing. So where can people find you, Michael?
The easiest way to connect with me, Audrey, is to go to my website, which is michaelcreichert.com. And I have a whole variety of things posted there, including the kind of talks that I give to schools or community groups or whatnot. And there's also an email address for me there.
Wonderful. Well, I am so happy to be connected with you and your wisdom. And as I showed you, people can't see it because they're only listening, but there are probably about 57 tags in your book. And I ended up highlighting so much that now I'm going to go back and take more notes. But your information and your wisdom will definitely get to our counselors at camp this summer, and hopefully to many other of the counselors going into this summer and getting ready to work with boys, because it's a really powerful message that you have, and a very encouraging one, that we need to not give up on these boys and just stay with them and be the relationship managers that they need.
Yeah, thank you, Audrey. Thank you for taking such a careful read of my work.
You're welcome. Okay, well, this was terrific. I'm so happy to be connected. I hope many, many people go and buy your book as a result of listening to my podcast. I am seeing now in the publishing world how hard it is to sell a book. At least, I mean, it just...
You're having some experience, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even a great book. Is yours also an audiobook?
I think it's going to be. I don't know that it is yet.
Okay. Because mine is not an audiobook, and they, like, my publisher didn't want to pick it up, but they have it out for like sub rights or something. But I know so many parents listen to audiobooks because of their time constraints.
It's like podcasts, right?
Yep, absolutely. So I really do hope that your book also gets in audio form, because I am not sure, but I don't think that many people read books anymore.
Or much less buy them, right?
Yeah. So I really hope, but I guess your speaking gets you out there and your message out there.
That's right.
That's terrific too. So I will put links to everything in the show notes for this episode. I'll send you an email with a link to it when it's out. And like I said, I'd love to send you my book. If you want to email me the best address for you, I'll have my publisher send you one, and love to hear your feedback about that. And I'm just so happy to be connected. So I'm glad your publicist reached out to me. I was like, yeah, that's a book I want to read.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you reaching out. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Have a great rest of your week. Really, thank you for your work. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
I got so many great ideas talking to Michael, and it really makes me look forward to working with our male campers at camp this summer and training their counselors in these important tips and techniques for really bringing out the best in our boys by always focusing on forming those really close connections with them. As always, you can find all the notes and links from this discussion on my website at sunshine-parenting.com. Search for episode 89. There are so many other great resources available on my website. Specifically, I'd love for you to check out the new Book Hub, which has all kinds of great downloadable resources that go along with my brand new book, Happy Campers: 9 Summer Camp Secrets for Raising Kids Who Become Thriving Adults. For more information about my book and all these resources, visit happycampersbook.com. Thank you so much for listening to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. I am having so much fun interviewing guests and learning more about how we can raise a generation of kids who become thriving adults. If you enjoy listening, I would really appreciate you taking a moment to give the podcast a rating or review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. I love to hear from listeners. If you have a comment or question, please feel free to use the voicemail recorder on my website to send me a message or send me an email at audrey@sunshine-parenting.com. I look forward to hearing from you. I was so moved when I was reading Reichert's book, How to Raise a Boy, that I highlighted and took a photo and sent to my 2 daughters this portion. And I'll end the episode with these words of Michael Reichert. In my own studies of successful teaching approaches with boys, the relationships they recalled most fondly were often ones that had gone through periods of struggle and testing. It was the teacher's determination to reach them, persisting despite setbacks, that made the relationship so meaningful to boys. Many boys hide their insecurities about learning behind a mask of indifference and passivity, or more openly, in disruption and defiance. When they act disrespectfully or are uncooperative, teachers tend to become upset and angry. The very ways that boys act out their upsets produce upset among those who care for them, leading them to blame the boys and push them even further away.
This podcast is a proud member of Parents on Demand, a network of high-quality shows for families just like yours. Download our free network app on Apple and Android and listen to your favorite episodes on the go.